September 20th, 1917, Ypres, Salient, Belgium, 5:40 a.m. Some battles have moments historians can explain. This isn't one of them. In the grey dark before dawn, 6 British batteries aim at a single German pillbox near Zonnebeke. 2 machine guns inside it have pinned the 9th Division for 11 days. 40 feet of concrete. That's the target. One hit opens the road forward. One miss means another morning of men dying in the mud. The calculations are finished. The range is checked. The elevation is set. Everything is routine. Except for one thing. At a gun position on Fresenberg Ridge, Bombardier Thomas Hail rests his hand on the elevation wheel of an 18-pounder field gun. Before the order to fire, he turns the screw just slightly. So slightly that even years later, he can't fully explain why. The shell leaves the barrel at over 1,600 feet per second. It disappears into the clouds. Seconds pass. The crew waits for the familiar crack of impact on the German line. It never comes. The shell sails past the pillbox, past the trenches, past the entire battlefield. Another wasted round, another line in a long list of misses. But nearly 2 miles behind the German front, at a railway siding outside Moorslede, 11 freight wagons sit in the morning mist carrying 340 tons of artillery ammunition, waiting for the dark to move them forward. No warning, no alarm, no reason to expect danger. Then, at 5:41 a.m., the ground disappears. Witnesses 11 miles away report a column of fire rising over the horizon. Tracks vanish. Wagons are thrown into the air. Back at the British gun, nobody cheers. Nobody even knows what just happened. As far as the crew can tell, they missed. Because on the map, in the firing tables, by every rule of artillery in 1917 they did. So how does a shell aimed at one target land 2 miles past it and hit the one place capable of crippling an entire sector's ammunition supply? That question starts with a notebook nobody was ordered to keep. But before we get to that notebook, you need to understand why every artillery expert of the time would have said this shot was impossible. By 1917, artillery was killing more men than rifles, machine guns, and bayonets combined. And every gunner in the Salient knew one unbreakable rule: you cannot hit what you cannot see. Once a target disappeared behind smoke or a ridgeline or the enemy's own front line, accuracy became guesswork. Royal Artillery Staff themselves estimated that counter-battery fire against known positions hit within lethal range only 8% of the time, and that was against targets they could actually observe. Beyond the front line, it was worse. Rear area targets, rail junctions, supply dumps, assembly points were considered nearly untouchable. Brigadier General H. Tudor, commanding the 9th Division's artillery, put it plainly in a June 1917 memo: firing at unobserved targets produces results indistinguishable from no fire at all. Not because he was wrong, because he was doing the math. Shells were rationed. A battery might get 150 rounds per gun per week. Nobody could justify firing them into empty countryside on a guess. So the army tried everything else. Observation balloons floated at 4,000 feet, wired to the ground, correcting fire shell by shell. Royal Flying Corps pilots flew spotting runs over German lines and were being shot down on roughly 1 in 4 sorties that autumn. Sound ranging tried to locate enemy guns by the noise of their firing, but still misjudged range by 50 to 100 yards. Every method needed the same thing. Someone had to see the shell land. At Hail's battery, on the morning of September 20th, nobody could see Moorslede. Nobody was aiming at Moorslede. As far as anyone there knew, the shell had simply vanished into the sky. That should have been the end of it, except Thomas Hail had spent 6 weeks noticing something almost nobody else bothered to record. Every gunner expected occasional misses. Hail expected patterns, And that habit, the refusal to accept an error without asking why, didn't come from the army. It came from a coal mine. Next, you'll meet the surveyor whose obsession with fractions of a degree may have changed the outcome of a battle 2 miles from where he was standing. Before the war, Thomas Hail spent 5 years underground, not as a soldier, as a colliery surveyor in Rotherham. His job was to guide tunnels driven from separate shafts, sometimes 1,000 feet apart until they met, underground, in the dark, with no way for the diggers on either end to see each other. There was only one way to make that work. Numbers, checked, then checked again, because a mistake of half a degree wouldn't show up for weeks, and by then, hundreds of hours of digging were already wasted. Hail learned one lesson and never let go of it. Don't trust confidence. Trust the calculation. And when something doesn't add up, find out why. He enlisted in 1915. The army didn't want him because he could shoot straight. It wanted him because he could read a map and do arithmetic under pressure. That skill put him behind an 18-pounder field gun as the layer, the man who turns calculations into elevation and traverse, the man whose hands make the tiny adjustments between a hit and a miss. Most gunners, once the shell left the barrel, considered the job done. For Hail, that's where the real work started. After every barrage, whenever the smoke cleared enough to see, he compared where a shell was supposed to land against where it actually landed. Then he wrote it down. Nobody ordered this. Nobody expected it. Most crews just reloaded and moved on. Hail kept a notebook instead, the same habit that had once tracked survey error underground, now tracking something stranger. 11 separate rounds, all recorded as misses, all followed seconds later by unexplained explosions well beyond where they were supposed to land. One miss like that means nothing. 2 is a coincidence. 11 is a pattern. And once Hail saw the pattern, there was only one person he could bring it to. What happened in that conversation almost buried the idea for good. Hail's notebook showed something specific, not random drift, consistent drift, long and slightly left. And the longer a gun fired without being cleaned, the more predictable that drift became. To Hail, that wasn't bad luck. That was a gun wearing out in a way the official range tables never accounted for, because those tables were built for 1,000 guns on average, not one gun after 90 rounds in the Flanders mud. He brought it to his battery commander, Major R.G. Price, in early September. Price didn't dismiss him out of arrogance. He dismissed him out of arithmetic. The entire British artillery system worked because every battery used the same tables. If every crew started inventing its own corrections, coordination across the whole front could fall apart. The tables aren't wrong because one gun is tired, Price told him. They're averaged across 1,000 guns. Averaging is the whole point. The idea should have ended there. A private notebook, kept by a bombardier, with no authority to change a single firing order up against years of standardized doctrine. Then, 3 days later, something changed the equation. Royal Flying Corps photographs flagged a railway siding near Moorslede, a possible ammunition dump. But it sat beyond any battery's confirmed range. No observer. No registered coordinates. Under normal rules, attacking it was a waste of a shell. Hail wasn't asking to fire blindly, though. He was asking to trust the drift. His notebook predicted that after roughly 90 rounds, his gun would carry one shell far past its intended target by a specific, calculable margin. Price waited. One shell wouldn't decide the battle. One shell wouldn't empty the ammunition supply. And if Hail was wrong, nothing would change. He gave the order. 1 round. Nothing official. Nothing recorded as a trial. Just one shell Time to leave the barrel exactly when Hale's calculations said the gun would miss in a very particular way. That shell was fired on the morning of September 20th, and what happened next turned a private notebook into something the entire battery couldn't ignore. The confirmation didn't come immediately. It came in pieces. First, 2 Royal Flying Corps observation balloons reported an unusually large explosion near Moorslede, moments after 5:41 a.m. That alone raised eyebrows. By afternoon, reconnaissance photographs showed the full picture: the siding gone, 80 yards of track torn from its bed, a crater 22 feet across at the point of impact. Captured German logistics records, examined later, confirmed what had been sitting in those wagons: roughly 340 tons of artillery ammunition, enough by German estimates to supply 2 full days of counter-battery fire. 1 shell, 1 secondary explosion, an entire ammunition shipment gone. And yet, on paper, that shell was still officially a miss. The pillbox at Zonnebeke was untouched. The assigned target had not been hit. By the standards of the firing order, Hail had failed. That should have been the end of the story. Instead, it started an argument. Major Price couldn't wave the notebook away anymore. The coincidence was too specific, too repeatable to ignore. 3 days later, he tried to apply the same correction again. It failed. The shell didn't repeat the result. For a moment, it looked like the whole theory had collapsed. But ordnance inspectors found something else. The barrel had kept wearing. Its behavior had shifted again. The correction wasn't wrong, it had simply expired. The notebook was never a formula. It was a moving target. Every gun aging differently, every firing sequence changing what came next. The only way to stay ahead of it was to keep watching, round after round, without stopping. If stories like this where the real history is hiding in the footnotes, not the headlines, are the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe now. This channel exists to find exactly these moments. Price didn't discard Hale's idea, he expanded it. Every gun in the battery would now keep its own fatigue log. No medals, no headlines, just more pages, more numbers, more small corrections that meant nothing on their own. But one exploding rail siding wasn't proof enough to convince an army. The real test was still weeks away, and this time it wouldn't be 1 shell. It would be an entire bombardment, resting on notebooks nobody outside 4 batteries had ever heard of. By early October, word had spread quietly through the 9th Division's artillery brigade. Not as doctrine, as a practical suggestion. Keep a log, record every round, watch for the pattern. 4 batteries started doing it. Crews began calling it drift correction by observed fatigue. No manual, no lecture, just gunners comparing notebooks after each barrage. Then came October 4th, 1917, the Battle of Broodseinde. Before sunrise, aerial reconnaissance had flagged several German supply points behind the ridge, most beyond confirmed observed range. Under the old rules, they'd have been left alone. This time, using their fatigue logs, several batteries picked 3 of those targets, timing their fire for the exact point in each gun's sequence where the drift was most predictable. Not a guarantee, a calculated bet. The barrage opens at 6:00 a.m. guns fire. At 6:04 a.m., observers report a massive secondary explosion near Kyburg. Later photographs confirm a crater field consistent with an ammunition detonation. 1 target destroyed at 6:11 a.m. A second battery tries the same method against a suspected depot near Gravenstaffel. The shell lands short. Smoke, but no secondary explosion. For Hail, that miss mattered as much as the hit. The method wasn't magic. It couldn't guarantee anything. It only shifted the odds. Before drift corrected fire, the division's own records show unobserved rounds against rear area targets achieved confirmed effect roughly 1 in 30 times. That October, in the batteries using the corrected method, it rose to roughly 1 in 9. Not because the guns got more accurate, because the crews stopped pretending every gun behaved the same. Captured German logistics reports later listed the Kyberg loss, 2 officers and 14 men killed, along with horses and ammunition destroyed in the secondary blasts. None of the men who fired those guns ever saw it happen. 2 days later, a report comes back down the line a few sentences, no names attached to the dead on either side. That's the entire story most soldiers ever get to see. If you want the rest of it, the parts buried in the paperwork, stay till the end. Thomas Hail never saw Moorslede burn, never saw the crater at Kyberg. He read the results the way everyone else did secondhand, days later, in a report with his name nowhere on it. He turned the page in his notebook, sharpened his pencil, and got ready for the next round. When the war ended, Thomas Hail didn't become famous. No medal, no headline, no mention of the shell that erased 340 tons of enemy ammunition in a single blast. He went home to Rotherham and went back to colliery surveying the same job he'd left behind. According to his son's later account, one habit never changed. He kept every notebook he ever filled. Inside the Royal Artillery, though, the idea kept growing. By mid-1918, drift correction logging had become standard practice for any gun that had fired more than 60 rounds without maintenance. Post-war statistical reviews credited a 3-fold improvement in unobserved fire effectiveness in sectors that adopted it, credited to improved understanding of barrel wear, not to one bombardier, not to one notebook, not to one shell that nobody at the time believed had done anything at all. And here's the part that makes this story worth remembering. Go back to 5:41 a.m. September 20th, 1917, the pillbox at Zonnebeke was never destroyed. The assigned target survived. By every firing record that morning, Bombardier Thomas Hail missed. That's how it was written down. That's how it stayed. On paper, he failed his mission, and 340 tons of enemy ammunition disappeared because of it. History keeps score by the objective you were given. Reality keeps score by what actually happens. Thomas Hail didn't set out to be right. He just kept paying attention to something everyone else had already decided wasn't worth watching.